Hi guys, this is Joseph from Joe Concepts. How are you doing today? Remember in the previous tutorial where I talked about this building, I unwrapped this building. So we just want to quickly finish up this building and texture them. And that's just what this tutorial is going to be about. It's more of a continuation from the video where I unwrapped this product. So if you have not watched that, I'm going to put a link in the description or in the card up to your right to check for the video so you can watch. So, but then let's just get into today's tutorial so we don't take too much of our time. Sorry. Okay, so before I get into texturing this product or this house, what I'm going to do is I'll try to explain the basics of the texturing so you understand what and what they do, and before we can now start going about bringing into this scene. So I have a very basic to explain that. And so for me to add materials to my objects, there are two ways we can add material. I can either add material from my um, um, property manager and then scroll down to see this icon that says material. If I click on this material, and by default you have one material, but let's imagine we don't have any material here, and this is what we have. So we can just click on plus to add a slot, and then the new will now add a new material. So you remember we had material before because that's the only material we have. Now because I've clicked on new, we now have second material. I can switch between this material by clicking on this, and I can go to the previous one I had before, or click here, go to the new one. Now this new material, you can also rename it by clicking either double clicking inside here or just clicking over this and then renaming this to material. So I can call this material sets. And you can see that becomes the name I give it. So if I click here, I have either a zero material or the material set that I just renamed. Then if you come down here, you see this section that shows you preview, how you want to preview your material. And you can either use a plain object. So let's say I want to add this material to a planar object. I can see the way it's going to look on a planar object, spherical object, cube, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to dwell here because we already have our object to review the material on. Then the next thing is the surface. And when you are adding your material, you notice, so the preview shows is then the surface is now telling you what kind of material you have. You can either use a node setup to get your material set, or you can just make do with this. So now let's look at the first thing, which is the surface. And this tells you the algorithm you're going to be using for your material set. So if you click inside there, you have all of these different material type. So you can see, for example, glass BSDF, glossy BSDF, air BSDF, and they really explain kind of objects you might want to use them for. So if you're trying to create a glass material, this is actually created for a glass material. Emissive is created for a light object. So if you want an object to emit light, you use emissive. If you want to have a background, use background. If you want to have a hair object, you use hair, right? And then, but the default is the principled BSDF, which holds everything, all right? So it has everything that settings that you can use for both hair, for skin, glass, every other thing you want. But then I'm going to be talking about a few of these channels, which will form the basis of what we're going to use for the house texturing or, yeah, texturing. So, first off, you also need to understand that there are two ways you can either texture an object or you can add a material to an object. You can either use um, the Blender shader material or the Blender shader, yeah, to use in texturing the object, or you can use a PBR texture map method. So the Blender shader map or the PBR texture map. So the difference between this is that for your Blender shader map, that's when you make use of the shaders that Blender gives to you. So it's inside Blender. So they are more procedural. So example of a shader map that you can use, for instance, you will see a basic color, which is an RGB color. So If I click here and I just choose whatever color that I want, and then it's going to be the color that I'm going to see on the object. Now, after putting this, you notice I'm not seeing any color. The reason is because I'm in my solid mode. So for me to see the color, I have to go to this material set, and you see, once I start to change, you're seeing the change in the color on the objects. All right. So the first channel we're going to look at is the base color, which talks about the color or the diffuse information on your object. So the diffuse information will be the color. Now, if you look into this color, you have your RGB, HSV, and the hex code. The RGB is more like you are having the red, green, and blue. And so you can, it's more of an additive method where you can tell the percentage or the ratio of red color you want to green to blue. So if I bring my green to 0 and my blue to 0, that means, and I take my red to 1, which is 100%, that means I'm having pure red. If I want to have pure blue, what I'll do is just bring my red down to 0, bring my blue up. I have pure blue. So the same thing goes with green. So now imagine I'm mixing these together. So this is like a mix of blue and green at this ratio. So that's what RGB does. Okay, then you have your alpha that tells you how transparent the object will be, the color will be or not, or how it's going to emit light or not. Another thing to note is that if you're using RGB, if everything is set to 0, it's going to be black. And if everything is set to white, sorry, if everything is set to 1, it's going to be white. So that's how the color space for the RGB works. Then we have the HSV. So the HSV is more like talking about the hue, saturation, and value. So the H is the hue, the S is saturation, and V is the value. The hue is talking about the particular beam of color type in the color spectrum. So if I bring this to everything to 1 1 and just change my hue, you'll see that this dot will be moving around the circle. And what that will be doing is just changing the color in our color spectrum, right? So that's where so if I had to talk about this, we say green, red, blue, those are the hue values. Then the saturation is telling you how dull the hue is or how vibrant it is. So what I mean by dull is if I bring this hue, sorry, the saturation, start bringing it down, see that the red color is becoming less rich till it goes all the way to no color. All right. And then if I bring it up, it start going from no color to till it goes to very rich um color of that red. So that's what saturation does. And then the value will either darken or lighten your color. So right now we have a light shade of this red. If I start to bring the value down, start reducing the shade, all right, it starts shading this, meaning it start adding black to it till it becomes black. If I start to increase, it starts tinting it, tinting the color till it becomes white. All right, so basically that's what the value will do. It's going to either darken your color or it's going to lighten the color. So that's what it does. So you have that also there. Then you now have your hex code, which so for every color there's a hex code value, which you can also use to apply. If I choose this color now, you can see this is its hex code. All right. So basically, the base color is just giving you color information about your objects. Then the next one is your metallic, which tells you how metallic the object is. So if I start to take this up now, you might not really see this well because there is no environment to show that this object is metallic. All right. So I'll just take this a little bit down like so, and let's go back. So you don't see anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my workspace to the shading workspace, and this is going to make use of some lighting in the environment that can be used. So let's go back to material sets, and then I can come and start to change this. And while I start to change this, you start to see still what is happening here. So you are not seeing this because my roughness, or if I take my roughness a little bit, so you start to see what's happening. And also I can also change my lighting scenario because it's looking dark here. So if I click here and I click into the swatch, I can change my lighting scenario to a different light scenario. Yeah, I think this is fine. So notice once I start to bring my metallic down, it doesn't look like a metal object. And if I take it up, it becomes like a blue metal. So that's what metallic does. So really, another stuff to also note with your procedural shader map is either like I said color is one of the shader map. This next thing is float value. So when I say float value, I'm talking about color number rather. So either zero all the way to one, stuff like that. So it can actually go beyond. But then when you have numerical values, so you can also use that to map your object. So in the case of metallic, zero is non-metallic and one is metallic. Alright. So roughness, I'll talk about roughness after specular. So if I come to specular, so if I take my metallic down, so why I'm going to bring it down is because if I come down to zero, that means the object is non-metallic, is dielectric. But does not mean that the object cannot be reflective, right? So for instance, plastic is not a metallic object, but at the same time can be reflective, right? So what will bring about the reflection is your specular. So the specular is what gives it the degree of reflection that the object has. So if I bring this IR level to zero, it means it's a math object, not reflective. And if I take it up, it's very reflective. Oh, now the thing is, I can actually see my reflection up top here. I think I'll change the color to a darker shade of blue so you can see it better. So you are seeing it's really reflective, but actually reflective, but what is happening is that the reflection is not really defined, and that's why I skipped the roughness. So if I bring the roughness to zero, you see that the reflection is really, you are seeing the trees around being reflected. If I bring my specular to zero, see that not reflective anymore. So the specular will tell you how reflective the object is, even though it's not metal. It's different from metallic. Now you see, the metallic is, this looks more like a metal. Once I bring this down, it's not metallic, but it's still reflective. And is as a function of your specularity. All right. So specular to zero, not reflective. Specular to one is reflective. So what the roughness now does is to break the reflection, to either blur out the reflection or leave it so, meaning is either the object is glossy or is rough. So if your value is set to zero, it means your object is glossy. You can see the definition of the reflected objects on this object or reflected images on the object. And if I take my specular, start taking my roughness rather up, that's blurring the reflection till it goes to something that looks like matte. All right, meaning everything is blurred out, so you don't really see reflection anymore. So what you do is you just use this value to kind of set how much of a reflection you want on your objects. So that's what this does. Then you have your alpha, which tells you how ghosty it is or not. Also, more like it's not catching lights or whatever. But my focus for this video is going to be base color, metallicness, roughness, specular, and then the normal map. So the normal map is more like giving you the detail pattern that is on the surface of this object. So we use the normal map for more of a pattern on an object. For instance, a wood. You know all those patterns you have on your wood. You can use your normal map to give that detail. Also for your plaster wall, you see all those noise on your wall that makes it not smooth, and that's what your normal would do. So we're going to be talking about that now. But now the thing is, another way you can also change this value, you can also change them here. So I can come to metallicness, change roughness here, and also specular. down here. So now, why I'm coming now over to this place is that we can actually use some other method to set our metallic roughness specular. And that brings us to the shader map of Blender, which is procedural. Remember, I told you for metal, I said the 0 is non-metallic and then 1 is metallic. Can also use the color information to set that. And so basically the way it is that if I have a color of 0, it means it is non-metallic. And if I have a color of 1 or white, is metallic. Color of 0 or black is non-metallic. 1 or white is metallic. So how do we do that? Don't forget, 0 is non-metallic, 1 is metallic. You can see the difference. So if I come here and I hit Shift A and I type RGB, you can see this RGB input. Just plug this right here into the metal. And if I don't forget, 0 is non-metallic. And I said 0 is also black. So if I bring this to black, see that this object is non-metallic. And if I take it up to white, you see that it's now looking like a metallic object. So why am I showing you this? Is because either you could use your float value to manipulate how metallic your object is, or change this channel, or you could use another shader which is color or gradient information to set that. So now what to get from here is that for your except for your base color, every other channel uses grayscale value. So when I say grayscale value, I'm talking about black and white. And I've explained for metal, black means not metallic, white means metallic. If I take this to roughness, same thing goes to roughness. Black means it is very glossy. Don't forget I said the 0 is glossy. The 0 is the same thing as black. So, and black means it's very glossy. That means it's reflecting the object. That's in the definition of object. Why white means it's 100% rough. So it looks more like a matte. So don't forget this is white. So I'm not seeing the reflection anymore. But if I start to bring this down, start to see the reflection on the surface. Till once I bring it to 0, the definition is the image is now being defined. You can see it's 100% reflective here. So this is another thing. This is a non-color information, which is also grayscale value. And now the same thing goes for my specular. So if I bring my specular, so let me take this somewhere here. So you see, bring my roughness here. If I bring this to my specular IOR, and you can see that this is less reflective because it's 0 for specular or is not reflective. So black is also not reflective, and 1 or white will be reflective. So it's just the roughness that's breaking. So if I bring this here, 0, 1, black, 1. So you see the difference. So this is the basis for um your PBR texture. So, and the thing is, let me just quickly talk about the normal map. So for the normal map, if I try to also use this and plug this, now the thing with normal map is it's also non-color value, but then the issue is that its own color space is quite different from the normal grayscale value. And another thing to note is that for you to use this, it's best to always have these dots aligning with the particular dot you want to connect them to. All right. So here, in this case, if you try to bring it here, you see that you're mixing from red, sorry, yellow to blue. You might not really see the detail properly because I'm trying to interpret color information or grayscale value in a normal Sargent space, which is wrong. So what I would do for me to properly represent this is to add another node in between, and the node is called normal map. So if I put my normal map in between, what will happen is that the color comes to this color, and then it gets transformed. It gets um, changed to the normal information, and then that is now plugged in. So whatever I do here now happen works. So I bring this down and it will do the calculation and you're seeing the difference. Let's take this up. See the difference between this and that the flipping. So that's what this does. But then, like I said, it's going to give you detail. So if I delete this, I'm bringing another shader. So let's try Verona texture. And I plug this color into the color of this Verona texture. And you can see the way the Verona texture is. All right. And this is the way it looks like. And let's actually plug it into this. Let's plug this color into the color first and see the way it looks like. Okay, so it's taking the color. If I take this here, and this is actually what I want to plug into this. So I'll take this distance into the color and then take that into my normal. And you start to see some changes in the way it's being interpreted here. All right. So basically, what the normal would do is just to add the detail. But so once we get there, you would really understand what that is. So if I start to bring the scale up or down, start to see what's happening, I can change this up. All right. So that's it there. To just change. Like I said, these are procedural because they come from Blender. If I want to have a wood texture, I will just come here. Um, there is this that I can use, Musgrave. And if I plug the Musgrave here, and let's see some more details. So you can also change a lot of things here just to get a sense of pattern on the object. All right, so there's a lot of node you can just play around with. Okay, so now with that said, if you are just giving a very basic, simple texture to your object, that's not a problem. You can use this. But by the time you want to start to add a particular map to your objects, like you have an image that you want to plug to your objects, that's when you start to see problem happening. Now, because I'm using a consistent color, you do not see where we're going to have a seam, all right? There won't be any, you won't see where the seam is on this object because you are using a consistent color, all right? So let me quickly go to edit mode, Control R to do this. And then if I select this edge and I use U, mark a seam at that point, and then go to edge mode. So remember the UV unwrap. So go to face mode, select all, U, and project. I can just do smart project, and then I'm going to project that. You notice I don't see any difference because I'm using consistent color. That's just what is happening here. Even though I have a cutting section here, and I've already said that we should cut in the middle here. But I'm not seeing any difference because it's the same color all through. That's what the blender shader will do because it's just consistent color. You don't really see all these problems. No stretching, nothing is happening. But by the time I add a different texture, so like an image texture. So by the way, for me to bring in my image texture, there are various ways I can do that. So I can just quickly get a particular material set and add that material set into this object. So let me just use, for instance, um, let's use this bucket. So so this is what PBR is all about. You are downloading textures of different things. You have your diffusion, your displacement, normal, roughness. Remember, I talked about roughness, normal, and diffuse base color. And the color is more of the diffusion. So I can use this and plug them in the place of those panels, and they will be what will be forming my information here. So one of the way to do is just drag this here, and then I can plug this into my base color, and that will be plugged into this section, and then you can see that this is giving me this. I can see this. Now, this is really easy and it's fine. The reason why it's smooth is because the normal cube that I work with is just the base cube that Blender started with. So I've not done any work on it. It is properly unwrapped. But by the time I start to scale, look at it. If I scale along my X and start to see some stretching going on in the texture, and if I go to my edit mode, face, select this face, extrude this out, and you can start to see what's happening. Do an insert, inner extrusion, extrude this inward, select this, inner extrusion, and extrude outwards. So look at what's happening. The texture is stretched here. The texture looks quite all right here. Here is even looking more stretched. And this is where the problem now starts to come. Now imagine if I remove this base color. See that the color is still consistent. All right. So that's the downside of using this because now, so if it can be an advantage and also disadvantage. If it is just a normal color I want to put, then I don't need to unwrap. I just have this. But if I know I'm going to be adding this, that's where the problem now comes. I need to start to look at unwrapping an object. So let's quickly analyze this. If I come to image texture, remember we looked at this in the previous sets, and we'll click on new and just change this to UV grid. Okay, plug that here. You start to see the problem also happening. This is giving me a square design, which is what I want. This is more of a rectangle. This is even more stretched. So we need to unwrap this for us to be able to get this accurately. So if I just select it before I unwrap, I need to make sure that my scale, I need to make sure that my scale is set to 1 to 1. So I'll just apply Control A, apply the scale. And now once I have that scale applied and I go to edit mode, select all of my faces. Let's just do a smart project. Once you project this, it's going to unwrap that. You can now see that I'm having a proper UV, which everything is now square. So now, by the time, if I now come in and I plug this texture, I'm not going to be having stretching going on anymore. You can see this because I've unwrapped this properly. All right. So that's the importance of unwrapping. And then once I have all these textures plugged, and this instead of me having color, this is now forming the color that I want. Okay. Let me delete this. Another thing you also have is that remember we also have normal and roughness. So if I bring my roughness here, so you can tell what roughness does. I will have to drag this to the rough value, then it will set the roughness. You can see without this, before now it is very reflective, and now once I take this here, it's taking the roughness information from this texture, and that's what it's using on the surface. So the same thing with the normal, but now the normal, you start to see what's happening now. If I bring this normal here and I try to plug it directly to the normal, the detail will not come. The pattern on the object is not really showing. You can see. And it's trying to give me the pattern there, but it's not really giving me the way it should be. And it's because I need to take that into a separate map, which is normal map. So if I bring my normal map and I plug this, and you can now start to see what's happening. Look at the difference between plugging it directly, see, and plugging the normal. So you start to see that texture, the grooves on this. So the more of this groove that I want, the more I'm going to increase the strength. So if I take the strength to like 3, you see that that detail is coming out right here. Okay, so you will define how much of this detail you are looking for by just setting your strength. So I think I'll go with 1.5, not bad, that is good. And now you see the whole work that I have to do. Now, if I'm to reduce or increase this texture here, what I will do is I have to come to this vector, drag out, look for mapping, So I'll go to mapping, bring this right here, and then I'll come to this, and I'll put in texture coordinates. So I will look for texture coordinate, which is here. You can see the work that I have to do. So now the texture coordinate is trying to use the generated information, but I don't want that. I want the texture coordinate to be based off of the UV that I've used. So if I drag this into my UV, so what I can do is, sorry, let me take this back. So I will just plug this vector back to the UV, and that will now is to use the UV to now retexture this back, which doesn't change. But from here now, I can come to my scale and drag down and start changing the scale. So the way the scale works is that the larger the value, the smaller the texture, the smaller the value, the larger the texture. So if I want to reduce this texture, I'll just increase this value. Let's see, and let's take it to like 4. See that the texture appears smaller compared to this. But now the issue is that it's applying that texture to the base color, but it's still not being applied to my normal and my roughness. So that means I have to select this guy and apply the same to these two other. So I'll just drag it. And this is effective because I'll be using one. That means I'll be using one um, of this setup to control 3 maps, right? So now everything is now back, right? So, but you can see the whole work that I have to do to start connecting all of this. So, which will bring me to the very easier way of doing this, and that will require you to enable a plugin if you have not enabled it, an add-on if you have not enabled it. It's um, right now. So you just go to Node Wrangler. You want to make sure that your Node Wrangler is enabled. So what the Node Wrangler will do is to allow you to, it will run some settings. So let me delete all these things. I run the same settings with the Node Wrangler. So let's look at one of the settings. So if I select this principal BSDF and I press Ctrl T, it's going to give me this setup automatically. You can see that. And then I can go and look for the picture that I want. And then I will select the texture that I want. This is one. Okay. So let's use this star floor. And this will okay, so there's one more thing I missed. Let me undo and quickly show you what's happening. This is another thing that you will face if you are using the drag and drop. There's this color space. For every time you are using color, you want to make sure you are using RGB for this color. But for every other ones like your roughness, metallic, normal, um you should not use sRGB or any other thing here, because we are going to be using grayscale value, which is non-color. So you need to change this. Right now, if you look at this, it's not really giving me the proper roughness until I change this to non-color. And then that's what will simulate the proper roughness. The same thing with my normal, change it to non this. All right. So that's what this will do. But then if I use this other approach, and let's see what happens. If I press Control, select this Control T, and then let's go and load that image. This, and let's pick this. It's going to load that. You see, it does this setting for me. I don't need to do all these plugins, start searching for them. But that means I have to still do again for normal, and for metallic. So for every time I press Ctrl C, it will add it to each of the channels. But that doesn't make sense again, but at least it's better than manual method. So I'm going to delete. So the most efficient one is selecting this, holding down Control Shift and then tapping T. And what this will do is it will allow you to go and pick all the textures that you want. So I want my diffusion, I want my normal, and then I want my roughness. Once I select all the colors, all the texture by holding down control, you see the option that says principal texture setup. Once I click here, it's going to do the setup and plug to the appropriate channels, and all these are done for you. So if I come here and I increase this texture, let's say 4, everything will be done right off the bat. And now, the good thing is you also have your control. You can still set your control out. You also notice that it plugged the normal map for us automatically. We don't need to do any work. So here, you notice that this floor is not reflective at all. And it's because of the type of roughness we have. So if I want to change, like control this roughness, I can also control by adding a RAM, a color RAM in between your normal. And what this color ramp will do is to allow, it will give me a gradient value, which I can use to control. Don't forget, we said black means it's going to be reflective or glossy, and white means it's going to be rough. So I have too much of a white here. If I click on this white and I click it, bring the white down, and the lower I come, you see what's happening here. So I'm controlling, I'm like modifying whatever texture that came from this to suit my need. So if I want the reflection to be like so, and I can just use my RAM to set that out. And then if I feel that the detail on the normal is too much, I can just come to the normal strength and reduce this maybe 0.3, and the detail is not that much. Look at it from 1. See the difference? So maybe 0.2. And it's still there, but it's not too much, but you can still also see your reflection. So you can always change your reflection. However, if I bring it close also still change. So you have that control over your object. So that's basically the basis of all these things, and that's what I'm going to be using to texture the building. So we have already done this. We've unwrapped this. So let's say I'm going to have a texture on this object, on this guy, in such a way that I'm going to have the top have a separate material, and then this base here have a separate material. And how do we do it? Let's start with this building first off, and I will just change this to shading. And so once I have this building set, let's create a new material. Okay, so this material is here, and we can just quickly, so let's see first what's happening. So we have this UV tab. If I select this guy and I press assign, oh sorry, select rather. So this is the selected object. So let's select, let's check this. Okay, so this is for this part, and this one is for the main body. I actually want this surface to also have its own material, so I can just select this surface like so. Yes, this should have its own material, so I'll just click in new material, new, and then I will assign. So it's going to be a separate material from there. So let's quickly add our concrete. So I'm going to, this is the main, right? Okay, so that's not, this is, the first one is the main. All right. So I'm going to make this its own material. So I'll delete this. I'll just call this concrete, or I'll just call this wall plaster white. So let me go and bring in the wall plaster white, Control Shift C, and I have some of those textures here. So I think plaster wall. So I have this, I have the color, I have the diffuse, I have the normal, and then I have the roughness. So once I do that, add that here, it's going to set. Let's see. Okay, so I think I need to just create a new material. Okay, so I'll minus this. Sorry, Control Z. So here, I'm just going to create a new material set to have that. So I'll select this guy. While it is selected, I'm going to look for another material. So let's just create a new material. Uh, New, and call this plaster white. So this plaster white, I want to bring it to this wall plaster. I'll just change it to that plaster white because it's a new material that I just created. So if I select this, Control Shift T, and let's go here now. Color this roughness. Now the setup comes here for me. So let's go back to object mode. And this is what that plaster style gives me. And what we can do is I can come here if I want to reduce this texture, I'll just come maybe 1.5 and you see what we have. I also notice the coloration on this on this wall. I want it to be pure white like I written. So what I'll do is for me to change this to pure white, there is a separate node that I can use for that. Shift A. I can add my hue saturation and value. So what I need to do is remember the value. If I bring the value up, it brings it to white. First off, let's bring the saturation down so that I don't have any color information. And then if I start to take this up, it start becoming white and white and white. So I think 2.2. I think there's no change between 2 and 2. So I'll just leave it at 2. And this gives me white color. So I want to have this same texture but on this surface, but it's going to be more like a grayish texture. All right. So what I would do is I will just select this one that gives me that material. So let's just see. I think it's this guy. If I hit tab, it selects and I select. Yeah, so that is it. So I'm going to change this to the plaster whites. So it's going to give me plaster white again, but what I'll do is I'm going to duplicate it and call this plaster gray. And so what I'm going to do to the plaster gray is just reduce the value and then it's going to give me that gray. And notice the caveat is you need to duplicate so that when I'm changing this, it doesn't affect the white. So I think this is the gray that I want. I also want another material for this, which is going to be a more darker shade of that material. So let's select this and I'm going to still go to that plaster gray. So this plaster gray, I want it to be even darker. So I'm going to duplicate again and call this dark gray. So I will just bring it even further more. Right, so this is what I'm looking for. So this guy, I'm going to have changed it to this because I was using texture to explain this. So I'll come to this plaster, dark gray, and this is the color I'm looking for here. So for this one here, maybe I'm also going to use so I'm going to use a different texture here. Well, let's look at this floor and see how we're going to set this. I know the back here I'm going to have a particular texture on the top, which is different from here. So what I'll do is go to edit mode, select, oh, before edit mode, I want to give it that white texture. So have this, I'll go to plaster white, and that's what I want to have for this. And then the next thing is the top. So if I go to edit mode and I select these tops, and then I'm going to create a new material, and then I'll assign, I'll call this wooden floor. All right, so for the wooden floor, I'll just go and bring that herringbone, Ctrl Shift T, and I'll go out, go for that herringbone packet. I need the color, I need this, which is the roughness and then the normal control. And that will be added. And then I have that. So I can always go and change the scale. Let's try 2 back. And that's give us that part right there. And if I feel that I don't want this texture, this detail to be that much, I'll just bring this down, maybe 0.3, so that it's more reflective like that. I don't want that texture to be too prevalent. Let's try 0.45, that's fine. And if you look through the base, you see the under is this, and then you have that. So let's see the premise. The premise, I'm also going to change this to something else. I just duplicate and I'll call this um, interlock. And what I just need to do is come here, Control Shift T, and let's go and bring the airborne interlock. There is one with okay, not this. Okay, we have this. So we want color, normal, and then the rough. And then that will be added to this. That's the surface. And you can see that the interlock is not to scale, it's too large. So we can just bring this, let's try 4. So if I'm on this surface, this is going to look like, so it's not that bad. I think it's fine that way. Okay, so this would be like another texture. I'm thinking it was to be a grad texture on that surface. So let's give this that tile. So while we have this, duplicate again so that I don't. So I'll just call this tile. And for the tile again, select this Control Shift T. And let's go and bring that tile. So this, the roughness and the normal, and then that will be plugged there. Remember what we did for how reflective it is because it's not giving us this reflection. So first off, let's take this. So like 2 is fine. And then Shift A, color ramp, put this in between the roughness, and then we'll reduce this white reflection that is a little bit more reflective, like so. And then we can go to the normal. Yes, that's fine. So I can select this. I want this to also have that tile, so I'll just change this to tile. And then this also to tile. And you see, we are gradually building up this building to get the actual texture that we want. So I'll just do this and I will stop here for this part. So if I select this, and you notice there is this part there which we added. So if I go to edit mode, let's select first to see because it's not this, not that. So this is what I want to change. All right. So I'm going to select this guy right here. I'm going to delete this and then select this, Control Shift C. Let's go and get this. There's this plank that I want to use, not this particular one. This other. Okay, so not this. This was the one I just. Yes. So I'll bring the normal, the diffuse, and then the roughness. And this is okay. So another thing is I notice there's always one problem with this. So I'm going to change this to the tile, but not the tile. Let's change it to the plaster. And then we can duplicate. Oh, sorry. Oh, I went to rename it. So this is going to be blank. So let's just come here. Let's look for any of this plaster. And it's giving it that gray plaster, but I don't want to have that gray. I want to have something else. So I will remove this again, or I can just go and since I have this, let's just go and bring this. So I can reload by clicking here and start to pick them one by one. All right. So we have the plank. Uh, okay, so brown plank. So this is the color. We'll bring the color here. Oh, sorry. Control Z. Okay, so don't forget, I don't want to just duplicate. I want to duplicate. I don't want to just change. Notice it changes. So I will duplicate that. And now that I have it duplicate, I'll call this plan. And then this can now change. So maybe I should just delete everything like so and run the command again. So I don't have to repeat things. So I'll go to that blank 5, select this, and then that. It's going to add it to this. But now the thing is again, I want this to be like a white color. I want to stay consistent. So add hue saturation and bring this saturation to 0. So it's going to give me then I can increase this to brighten it up. Maybe 4, maybe 4 is too much. All right, so I'm liking that. And then the next thing is the scale is too much. I'll just bring the scale. 4 might be too much. Let's try 3. Yeah. Well, now I want this to be horizontal, so I'll just come to rotation Z and start to change. See, so if I make this 90 degrees, I'm going to have an horizontal kind of wooden plank here, and that's how I'm going to set that part. So if you look through, I have basically done everything that I need. Like so, imagine I have my space inside. I can now start to add my texture. So for this interior, I already have a I've already duplicated this. So you see, we have the living room, the bedroom, kitchen, and toilet. So for the living room, I want the living room to be that plank that I have here. So this pattern. So I'll just come here. Let me just go into the space so that I will have zoom out first. Zoom in. So while I'm here, I go to the living room. Remember wooden floor. So I'll just pick the wooden floor, and that's for the living room. You know, the kitchen also, if I want the kitchen to also have the same texture all through, but I created it in such a way that I can choose to give it a separate texture. So, but let's just give it again the same texture, wooden floor. See, it goes straight all the way. See that? And then for this, if I have a texture for what's it called? For the toilet, this is where I can now start to add all of those texture and just replace. So basically, this is how you can use your map and then you just have everything. So if I'm to do all this now, I already know that this is plaster dark gray. So I'll just select this, go for all of the color. So I will just start trying. I try plaster dark gray. You see, this is what that is giving me. So I actually want this to be plastic. So give me that other one. So for this marble is what I'm going to change to that plaster dark gray. Like you see that. So I have that. So I can do the same thing for everything like that. So this is going to be the plastic because I need it to be shiny and move change this marble to plaster dark gray. So I'll continue that all through for everything. and then you have all of your buildings. So this is what I wanted to explain to you about the texturing and all of that. So I'll go ahead to finish up this texture and show you my rendering. In the last section where I was talking about rendering, you would have seen everything in there. I have that. So if you feel this was helpful, please do give me a like and a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, please do subscribe because I do tutorials like this every day. You have a wonderful day and God bless you. Bye.